Well, we take stock of how global markets were across last week as well as how they've opened in early trade this week. Of course, a truncated week of trade last week with Friday being Good Friday. Pretty much all global markets had that day off. When we look at the US, it closed on Thursday lower with the Dow down around 1/3% or thereabouts. The S&P 500 lost around 1.2% and the Nasdaq was down over 2% in trade on Thursday. European markets though were hanging on to an inkling of green on Thursday. However, holding on to how US markets were doing, largely tech stocks, consumer services and consumer goods were largely lower. Of course, the pressure from bond yields rising not helping the markets at the moment, and that has continued through the weekend. Also, commodity price inflation has continued to come through as well. That will keep a good hold on markets as well. The other push to markets though will be from a perspective of earnings. Well, quarter one earnings, or rather calendar year 22 quarter one earnings releases will start kicking through. Of course, the China GDP numbers also coming healthy 4+% growth on a year-on-year basis for that China GDP number. However, quickly moving on to how Asian indices are looking in early trade today, largely mixed is what the Asian basket is looking like. Especially when we look at the Nikkei down nearly 2% as we speak. The Shanghai is down around 0.4% or thereabouts, and the Kospi 2 holding on to very marginal losses at the moment. When you look at the Hang Seng and the ASX, probably the only two indices holding on to positivity. The Hang Seng is up around 2/3% or thereabouts, and the ASX 200 is up over 0.5%. When we look at the SGX Nifty at the moment, it's up around 0.4% as we speak. When we look at oil, it's lower, largely on the fears that EU will put an embargo on Russian oil, and that's led oil prices sharply higher. When we look at oil, it's very much below that $108 a barrel mark. So slowly moving towards that region, and it's up almost 5% over Friday. In fact, Brent is closing in on at $113 a barrel mark. Definitely not good news, especially for oil importing countries. When we look at gold, it's just below that $1,990 an ounce mark as we speak. Bond yields, they are at 2.86%, so definitely a rising trend when we look at bond yields. And of course, crypto on the other hand is a bit beaten. When we look at crypto, it's below that 40,000 mark is where Bitcoin is hanging on to. Lastly, the dollar index is continued to hold out well above that 100 mark, and that is definitely not good news for countries like India. And of course, the currency pressure will continue on the rupee as that dollar continues to hold out above 100. Broadly, this is how markets are looking. Negative start currently is what we're looking at from an Indian market perspective.